Well, good morning. It's the appointed time. Let's call to order the September 24th meeting of the MAP3 Citizens Advisory Board. Jill, we believe we have a quorum. Do you agree? We want to get you off to a good start here. Thanks for being here with us today. You have been provided with copies of the minutes of the August 27th meeting. Are there any additions or corrections? It's been moved and seconded that we approve the minutes of the August 27th meeting. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The minutes are approved. David, we have the revenue and expenditure report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You have in your packet the MAP3 revenue and expenditure report for the period ending August 31st, 2015. On the revenue side for the month, $9,617,839. For the fiscal year, $18,872,853, and for total program revenue of $547,197,424. On the expenditure side for the month, there's $10,825,290, and you can see the majority of that expense has been with the fairgrounds and with the river, where we have large active construction projects underway. For fiscal year on expenditures, we have $10,826,218, and then for total program expenditures of $125,605,210. I'm going to invite Lance Musgrave up to the podium to explain a couple of things. There was a question last month about July report, and also we put a replacement on your seat here for the budget and obligations report. So Lance,
welcome.
Thank you. Mr. Adams had a question regarding the July report on the revenue and expenditures, and what we're dealing with is a fiscal year-end close situation. We had provided you a draft of the June report based on what this financial situation was up to the point of closing, whether accounting is sorting out which expenditures go in which fiscal year. So we anticipate that next month we will bring you an actual for June on the revenues and expenditures. And we will also provide you with a July report. At the time that we compiled the financial report for this month, the July figures were not available. However, since then they've become available, but we didn't have them on the agenda, so we were not able to provide you with those. But we'll have those next month for you. And then the final thing is that on the budget and obligation report in the memo, it reflects September 10th, and the attachment that we provided was August 10th. It's correct, but it is not September as on the memo. So we have provided at your seat this morning the September 10th report. So I'd be glad to answer any questions if you might have any.
Michael, any questions?
No, I'm fine. Thank you.
Anyone else? Lance, thank you.
Thank you.
I wanted to mention one thing, David, to make sure I'm understanding it. On the revenue and expenditure report, the footnotes, 1 and 2?
Yes, sir.
2 refers to the extreme right-hand column, 6.1%, so we may assume that based on the assumptions from the inception of the project, we're 6.1 ahead of revenue projection.
Yes, sir, on the original projections to get to the $777 million.
Yes, and so where we're showing the target, the 2.1, that is based on projections that are updated annually by the finance department.
That's correct.
But from inception, we're still 6.1 ahead.
That's correct.
Any other questions? Anyone else? All right, go ahead, David. Anything else on that?
No, sir, that's it.
All right, then let's move to item 4. You all will remember that at a motion to accept. Okay. Michael moves we accept and receive that report. Is there a second? Second. Then seconded. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Unanimously adopted. Item 4, you'll recall that at a previous meeting I had asked David and ADG if they would give us a report on how we're doing with respect to the implementation plan that was developed at the outset of the project and approved by the city council, and they're prepared to do that today. Mike is going to give that report today.
Yes, sir. We've asked ADG, our program consultant, to help us with this, and Mike Mize is here to give us an update on the schedules.
Welcome, Mike.
Chairman McDaniel, board members, Mr. Todd, glad to be here to give you this update. Make sure I got the right button going. Okay, here we go. I hope you guys can see this. We tried to make this as clear as we could on your, so you can see them on your monitors. But just to go over the format once again, each of the different phases is color-coded. Site acquisition and site prep are the green lines. The orange line is pre-construction, which is involves the architecture and engineering services primarily for each of the projects. And the purple represents the actual construction time. The solid lines, the ones that are not cross-hatched, represent the original implementation plan schedule. The other lines that you see, which are the same color but are cross-hatched, represent what has actually occurred and what we anticipate going forward to give you a comparison between the implementation plan and where we are currently. We're going to start with the convention center. So if you look at across the top, you'll see that it's a continuous line, green on the right, orange in the middle for pre-construction services, and then the purple line, which shows construction being complete at the end of 2018. If you look at where we are today, I think we all understand that that project has been delayed because of some of the site acquisition issues that we've had. But what we are showing is, and this may be a little bit optimistic, we're hoping that by the end of the year we will have identified and have acquired or have control of one of the two sites that are still in contention. Kathy O'Connor with the Alliance is working diligently with landowners in those sites to make sure that we know what that land cost is going to be before we make that decision. If we have that completed by the end of December, we're showing that the completion for the convention center would be at the end of the third quarter of 2019, which is a little bit of a pushback, but I think given the kinds of delays that we've had, it's pretty understandable. So, and if you have questions during this process, don't hesitate to ask me. I mean, obviously, I'm willing to answer any questions you may have. Park, this schedule looks a little more complicated because the park, as you know, has been phased into really three phases, two phases for the upper park originally, and a third phase for the lower park. I'm really going to focus more on the two phases for the upper park. We originally had shown that the initial phase one of the upper park, was going to be complete at the end of 2014. You may recall that was a very limited scope. It was about a $10 million budget, as I recall, and the idea was to try to prepare the north edge of the park for the completion, to coincide with the completion of the boulevard, which obviously hasn't been done yet either. So one of the things that's happened because of that is we've taken advantage of that. We've consolidated phases 1 and 2 together, so that when you look at where the original construction was supposed to end for phase 2 of the park, it shows at the end of 2018. We are now showing that phases 1 and 2 could end as much as a quarter ahead of that because of the consolidation of the work that we have. So, any questions about that?
Mike?
Phase 3 is still on track for when it was originally.
So the lower park construction is still on track for the
Yes, sir.
period that's shown in the original plan?
Yes, sir. Thank you. So, and one of the things, the tree package looks like an incredibly long period of time on that timeline. I just want to point out that one of the things that will happen is we are in the process right now of trying to acquire those trees. we're going to put out a bid package within the next couple weeks for that tree package. We will acquire those trees. They will not be the size that they will be when they're planted at the park. We will acquire smaller diameter, smaller caliper trees, replant them, and by the time they're ready to be planted in the park, they will be the caliper that the Hargraves team has designed. And that's to get them acclimatized to the Oklahoma City area and make sure that they have a better chance of success. So next we have the streetcar, modern streetcar. There have been the investigation standards period, which we originally proposed, has been extended pretty significantly. I think, and Zane and Nathaniel can attest to this. There's just been a lot of work that's gone on in preparation for actually performing the engineering. There's been lots of public contact, and the streetcar is a much more complicated issue than I think a lot of people realize, and we wanted to make sure we got it right. We now think we have the best route, and it just took a little longer to get there than we had originally intended. So we are, I believe on today's agenda, you have an opportunity to recommend approval of the streetcar contract for the vehicles themselves, and that will go to City Council next week for their approval, and then we'll in short order be able to issue a notice to proceed with respect to the streetcar production itself. Rob Edgecombe from Jacobs is going to talk a lot more about that in his presentation. But so the streetcar construction is out past where the original implementation plan showed. However, we are showing final completion is a little difficult to understand on this because there are so many different pieces to this puzzle. The actual construction will be completed for phase one in the beginning, at the end of first quarter of 2018. That doesn't mean it's going to be ready. If you drop down, you'll see a yellow bar that we've added, which is the testing period. That testing period will start before the construction of the track has been completed. We'll have a section of track on Hudson where cars can be tested and the system can be tested. So we're hoping to have the streetcar ready for operation mid-2018. And then there still is a small amount of money available for the phase two later on, and we're going to withhold judgment on that until we figure out exactly where we are on the main line construction. So next is the river. In some ways, this is one of the simpler things we have. Anything that's currently under construction, the information that we're providing is coming from the contractor to the MAPS office with respect to where we are on the schedule. We try to monitor those closely, but that's where this information has come from, for example, here in the fairgrounds and the sidewalks and trails as well. So the Whitewater facility itself is currently scheduled to be open sometime. We're showing the end of first quarter of 2016. Downey is confident in that number, and so are we. So that is moving along on schedule. Phase 4 of the river group at this point in time can't happen because, as you recall, phase 4 money was moved to phase 3 for the Whitewater facility. So, fairgrounds, what we're showing is, I think you have seen some change orders for weather delays at the fairgrounds. That has pushed the expected completion date past the original date. We are now looking at the contract right now, and the schedule provided by the contractor showed June 2nd of 2016 as the completion date for expo building. Next, wellness centers. Wellness center number one, if you take a look at what the implementation plan called for and where we are today, we're way behind on wellness center number one, but I think the issues that we had in making sure that we had the appropriate operator for wellness center number one, I think we all understand that those issues caused the delay, and I think we're all comfortable with where we are today with respect to the operator, but it also gave us the opportunity to get an operator for wellness center number two. And so if you look at the schedule and you look at wellness centers 1 and 2 together, while wellness center number 1 is behind the original implementation plan schedule, wellness center number 2 is scheduled to be done before its original schedule date on the implementation plan. With respect to wellness center number 3, we're in the process of trying to get started on the search for an operator right now, so that is tracking with the original implementation plan schedule. Sidewalks. One of the things that's different about this schedule, if you look at it, there's a red line about 3/4 of the way down the chart. The work below the red line is not MAPS related. That is the additional. It was. I shouldn't say it's not MAPS related. It's not. It was not part of the original MAPS program. It's the additional $9 million that was added later. So there is no comparison to the implementation plan for that work because it was never a part of the implementation plan. But if you take a look at where we are on the sidewalks projects have taken longer than we thought for a number of reasons. The areas which rose to the top in terms of need for sidewalks ended up being some of the more complicated areas in the city where we are providing sidewalks. Lots of driveways, utilities to deal with. So it's taken more time both on the engineering and the construction side, but we're well on the way to completing phase 1 is complete, and we're working diligently on phase 2, and on phase 3 as well. So, trails. Once again, those were a little more complicated. We had some site acquisition issues that we had to deal with that pushed those off a little bit. But as you can see, Trails Phase 1 shows complete at the end of this quarter. We're really in the process of doing effectively punch list items and detail work, but those two trails are functional. They're functional, but they're not quite complete. So. And Phase 3, David, have we actually engaged engineers for those projects yet? Or we're in the
consultant selection period.
So we're currently tracking with the original implementation plan on those as well. So, any questions?
Any questions?
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Michael, for this report. The admonition is that each of the subcommittee chairs and subcommittee members should review this carefully with respect to the separate subcommittees and make sure that we are doing everything we can do to keep us on track, taking into account all the things that each of the subcommittees have to deal with. All in all, congratulations. Thanks, Mike. Good job. That brings us then to item number 5. David?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item 5 is recommend resolution approving contract with Enacon Group AS for the MAPS 3 modern streetcar vehicles in the amount of $22,958,057, subject to receipt of required letters of credit and proof of insurance, project M3-S005. If you recall, the conversations we've had in the past and today that we are actively working on that contract, and we bring that contract to the advisory board today, and we have Rob Edgecombe here today from Jacobs Engineering to give us some details and highlights on this contract.
Welcome, Rob.
Thank you very much. It's great to be back. Thank you for having me again. You'll recall last time I was here, we were getting approval to negotiate the contract with Innoconn, having gone through the selection process and the RFP. So today what I want to explain is what has happened since that point and to bring us where we are today. So we started negotiations with Innoconn. We took the specifications and the RFP documents that we had before, and we also provided them with a draft contract that the city produced. So we have made some amendments to the specification as a result of the discussions with them. There are a number of smaller items that are in there, but the main items that I want to bring to your attention are that we've incorporated a bunch of performance criteria that are based on the way the vehicle is designed to operate in service, so we can actually model how that vehicle performs as we do any of our modifications to the infrastructure. So those criteria were not in the original specification, but that will give us something that we can assess the vehicle when it arrives on site and ensure that it performs in accordance with our requirements. The other changes to the specifications were detail updates with regard to things like environmental conditions and platform interfaces and things like that. But fundamentally, we didn't make any great changes to the specification. Aside from those items that I've mentioned, the specifications remain exactly as they were when we went out for the RFP. With regard to the contract itself, we negotiated the terms of that with Innoconn over the last few months. There are a number of conditions precedent for the contract to become active. So while we're recommending this contract go forward and assuming it gets approved today and then approved by City Council, Innoconn then has some outstanding actions to provide letters of credit with regard to the performance guarantees, with regard to the warranty guarantees, and insurance certificates that they need. So they will have a 30-day period from once the city approves the contract to provide those documents. If those are not provided, there is no contract. So that will be the action on them. Once they provide those documents, then the city, provided it accepts what they've provided, will be in a position to issue the NTP for the contract. With regard to pricing, the pricing is exactly as it was when they proposed to us and what was evaluated during the RFP phase. There is a price for the vehicles, and there is a separate line item there for spare parts. That spare parts is a price list, but we actually have a 6-month period in which we can decide what of those spare parts we actually want to take and which ones are not as important to us, as long as we operate within that cap. There has been a change with regard to the payment profile. We renegotiated the payment profile with them based on some of their input and some of the milestones that we were looking at in the contract. And one of the things that we elicited from them as a result of the change to the payment profile is we now have no cap on liquidated damages. So we have liquidated damages in the contract for delivery and for out of service if there is a warranty defect with the vehicles. Previously there was a cap proposed from Innoconn, but we traded that so it's now unlimited liquidated damages.
What was the cap they proposed?
10% of the contract value, which is quite a normal standard for industry to do, but the unlimited one is it's a significant change. So the payment profile has been changed, and we consider that liquidated damage. It's one of the tools that we have in our toolbox for managing them. We've talked in the past about how important schedule adherence is with this project, and so we will be having kick-off meetings with them in a very short period after the contract is finally live. We will have design review activities in the opening months of the contract. We will be having in-site inspectors on location, and we also have obviously the liquidated damages as a sort of a stick to beat them with to try and get them to deliver on time. All of these things obviously are a part of the tool set to try and make sure that we can get this project out and on time. The first vehicle will be delivered to the city 24 months after NTP, and then they will be coming 1 a month thereafter. So the key thing I want to bring up is really that from what we discussed when we first issued the RFP and when we'd finished the evaluation, very little has changed from that. The things that I've mentioned today are the significant changes, but otherwise we're going on pretty much with what we originally envisaged when we put the package together. So if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
I have one. Now, when you all brought us the recommendation that we award the contract to Innoconn, knowing that they're out of the United States, Have you had experience with them that would indicate whether or not getting letters of credit or getting proof of insurance would be any problem for them, or anything that we should be concerned about, or do you feel good that they'll be able to get proof of insurance and letters of credit?
We believe they can do it. We have been working with them a lot over the last few months, and it hasn't been an easy process. That's one of the issues that we've been working with closely to try and get to where we are today. We've had exchanges with them on the draft language that will be incorporated in those documents. We have had a couple of issues with regard to the way that Europe seems to go on vacation in the summer when we're trying to have some of these discussions, and people don't seem to be as available as they should be. But we've been working, the city staff and our team have been working closely with them. We think we can get this done, and they had getting to a signed contract was an important milestone for them in order to get their banks to then issue the letters of credit, which is why the process is being done the way it is with the conditions precedent. So we're optimistic it can work. Obviously, we have to see it. The city staff had to be satisfied with the final language, but we think it will go through.
So if we approve this today and we send it forward to the city council and they approve it, then they've got 30 days to get those documents, and if they don't, there's no contract.
Absolutely.
And what does that mean? If there's no contract, we extend the time, we go to the second bidder, or what do we do?
David, do you want to step
That would be an issue that we'd have to deal with at that time. We could very well be looking at the second bidder at that point.
Now, is there a mechanism to extend that 30-day time? Is that an option if it looked as if they were close to?
No, the contract is 30 days and done. We've been working, we would have liked to have had this contract sooner. It's obviously a critical item with regard to the schedule for the implementation of the project. And we have both city staff and the consultant staff have been giving a very clear message to Innoconn that this is time to get the thing wrapped up and done, or that's it. So I don't think there's any intention to extend that 30 days.
So
the way the contract's written, it doesn't extend.
Okay. That's a strategic decision for leverage over Innoconn then.
Yeah, I wouldn't like to say it's for leverage. I think it's just the fact that we have to get to a point where we either know that we know we're going this way, or if we're not, we then have to see what the alternatives will look like. So it's just time to make a decision.
Okay. Thank you.
Michael?
Were there any issues, however minor they might be, that we were hoping for that for whatever reason they balked at, or did things go just as you hoped?
No, I have to say that with regard to the sort of technical performance elements of the contract, they have been very cooperative. They actually were very helpful in making some positive suggestions about how we put elements into the specifications so that they are more easily measurable when the vehicles come to be delivered, so we have less opportunity for dispute with them. And they've been providing us a lot of information with regard to battery and off-wire performance, which has been very helpful in some of the other things that we're doing on the project as well. So from a technical point of view, we found them to be very cooperative. It's just this sort of getting the contract terms items and the banking elements of it have been the more difficult item.
Any other questions?
Yes.
David?
My understanding is there's a $1,500 penalty per day for failure to deliver on time.
Correct.
Is that sufficient? When I was looking at the calculations I was just making, if they were 100 days late, that comes out to being 0.6% of the cost of one of the cars, if 22 million is the cost of the cars. So they could be up to a year late, and it would amount to just 1.5% of the total cost. Should we look at a higher penalty per day, such as $5,000 or more?
When we're looking at liquidated damages, it's important that liquidated damages are seen as a pre-assessment of loss, so that that's the way they're defined legally. And so what we've looked at is the cost implications of not having the vehicles available or having them out of service. So one of the things is whether we'll be providing an alternative form of transportation or something like that in the interim. The LD rate that we have in the contract is actually a little bit above what is normal for streetcar type procurements. We've seen a number of the contracts where it's about $1,000 a day, some where it was $750. We believe that $1,500 was a more appropriate value and was a justifiable value. If you are looking like you're being punitive with liquidated damages rates, they can actually be overturned. So we think this was an appropriate rate, and it's slightly above market.
Well, can you tell me then, at what point do these per-day penalties go away and we are then able to look at liquidating damages?
These are liquidated damages.
So the $1,500 penalty per day, I thought we were talking in terms of 100% of the cost we could receive as liquidating damages if they failed to comply with the...
We have unlimited liquidated damages, so we could, in theory, if the vehicles never showed up, we could, in theory, recover more than the contract value. Obviously, that's a terrible situation and not what we're aiming for here, but they're not penalties because liquidated damages are not a penalty, they're a pre-assessment of loss. And so that $1,500 a day is the liquidated damages for late delivery per day per vehicle, and the same thing if a vehicle is out of service for a warranty defect, so it's per day per vehicle. So if we don't have the 5 vehicles delivered, then we would be getting 5 times $1,500 per day.
Could we also, I assume we'd be paying them as we go along, and so if they were late in delivery, could we withhold payments that were due?
The payments are due on milestones, and so they're based on performance criteria being met. So they don't get paid unless they have achieved the milestones that they're required to achieve. So the idea of tracking the availability of the vehicles, we will have one of the first deliverables when they have to create the contract is the master schedule. So we will be getting a far more detailed master schedule than we saw in the request for proposals, for example. And we will be our management team will be tracking each of the items within that schedule to understand where the performance is. We will be doing on-site inspections with their vendors. We'll be doing on-site inspections in their final assembly location. We'll be tracking the order placement that they make with their vendors and the terms that are in there to make sure that the components will arrive in accordance with the master schedule. So liquidated damages is sort of the last
straw.
Yeah, but it's our process is designed to make sure that we have visibility all the way through the program with regard to where they are on schedule, and if we feel they're missing, then we put rectification actions in place with them early. I mentioned this when I was here before, but the critical issue with a program like this is the early phases. The first few months are the ones that make or break a project like this. We only have 24 months before the first vehicle shows up, and so if you don't get everything set right in the early months, then you're always playing catch-up. And so we're going to have a very aggressive strategy with them at the beginning to make sure that we understand where they are, they understand exactly what we require, we get the visibility of the things we need to, and not only that they tell us what they're going to do, but that we can then check and audit that they're doing what they're supposed to do. And the city staff will obviously be very closely involved in that as well.
Well, do we have the ability at some point in time, for example, say halfway through the contract term, if we feel like there's just no way they're going to be able to complete this? And the reason why I bring this up is they have had history of late delivery. Can we just walk away?
There are default elements written into the contract. I don't want to step outside my area of expertise, and so City Council, maybe Amanda has worked with us on this, could probably better explain what those terms are. But yeah, if they are in default, then we can walk away. And we have a performance bonding. The letters of credit are performance bonds for us to recover if they have failed to perform as required by the contract.
Thank you.
How do the letters of credit compare to the contract price? I mean, are they the full cost of the contract?
100% on the performance letter of credit and 20% of the contract value for the warranty one.
Well, I would take some comfort, in addition to the penalties, by knowing that we weren't paying them if they weren't getting it done. So they're incentivized not just by the $1,500 penalty that they might have to pay. They're incentivized because they don't get paid and they don't get the work done. So I think that's an additional incentive in addition to the liquidated damages that we all should take some comfort from. Do you agree?
I do indeed. And might I didn't answer one of the questions that the gentleman asked with regard to their previous performance on other contracts. A number of our team have been working on the Seattle project, which our vehicle is basically an off-the-shelf version of the Seattle car. So we're aware of the issues that they've had on that program, which obviously makes us better placed to deal with some of those things as they come up on the program. Also, because they've been solving problems on that program, it means that we get the benefit of the fact that they've already gone through that. I would highlight one particular issue that's a benefit to us on this program compared to Seattle, is that they required a lot of local manufacture. And so they built a number of the cars locally, they got local supplier issues, and a lot of the delays they've experienced have been related to not building the cars on their own site. All of our vehicles will be built in the Innoconn facility using their core supplier base. So I think we are intending to avoid a number of the issues that they experienced there. But we are well aware of the problems they have seen, and we're prepared to deal with those as well.
Nathaniel and Zane, Zane, you want to be heard?
I just wanted to discuss, the cars are a very technical aspect of this project, and we've talked a lot about risk, for technical risk and schedule risk. Can you tell us how technical risk and schedule risk have come into play, and what makes us believe that they'll be able to accomplish the construction?
Absolutely. So starting with the technical risk, one of the approaches we took all the way through this RFP was that we were trying to reduce technical risk as much as possible. The schedule available to us and the budget available to us did not provide us the resources to do a development program. So we were looking at an off-the-shelf product as much as we could get it. So the vehicle that we're buying is the Seattle design of the car. The only difference to the Seattle car is that we have the trucks from the Washington, D.C. car. The reason we have a different truck is because it has a self-leveling function, which allows us to bring the vehicle in and maintain a very close tolerance to the platforms for accessibility boarding. But it's an off-the-shelf truck already in service. The vehicle is an off-the-shelf vehicle already in service. And so we are not doing anything in our design that is intended to create development risk. So we're looking to minimize that as much as possible. The specification that we wrote was designed to cover all of the key elements of the vehicle, and our subject matter experts will be dealing with those issues in design review as soon as the project becomes live. So technical risk, there is some. There's always risk when you're building a complex vehicle like this, but we believe that we've minimized it as much as we can, and then we will have the oversight to ensure that that doesn't cause us problems during the program. The schedule risk is the one that is far more of a concern to us at the moment. It's 24 months to the first vehicle being turned around is certainly achievable, but we've seen performance issues with both this manufacturer and with other manufacturers in the marketplace, and we know that it's a concern. And so that's why I'll sort of come back to that point I made earlier on about how important it is for us in the kickoff phase to get in with our organization as quickly as possible to understand exactly how the schedule breakdown is constructed, and to keep our observation of what they're doing and our bringing rectification actions if we see any schedule slips occurring as quickly as we possibly can. But it's certainly the thing that's number one priority as far as we're concerned right now.
Other questions?
Just a clarification, when we were talking about that $1,500 penalty, that is per car.
Per car, yeah. And it's not a penalty. It's liquidated damages, it's not a penalty.
Nathaniel, does the subcommittee have a recommendation about this?
We did. We had, among those in attendance, we had unanimous approval, recommending approval of this contract. I just want to say thank you to Rob and Company and the city staff for working through this. My business partner is a lawyer, so I know what it can be like working through a contract, especially when it's overseas. So really appreciate the diligence and coming up with mitigating solutions to any of the risks that we perceived. And also, I take great comfort in knowing that we get to benefit from the experience of Seattle, just as we've benefited from Seattle in other ways, to be able to learn from some of the issues that have come up elsewhere and mitigate those. So with that, I would move approval.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the resolution in your packet approving the contract with Innoconn. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The resolution is adopted with, thank you, Rob.
Thank you very much
We
indeed.
appreciate you guys. Thanks a lot. David, item 6, is it?
Yes, sir. Item 6 is recommend resolution approving final plans and specifications to be advertised for bids for the MAPS 3 Upper Downtown Public Park Engineering Services. Project 1, Public Utility Relocation, Street and Alley Removal, Project M3-P004, WC-0811, SC-0908. We have Chris Savage here from Johnson Associates to give you a summary of what all is included in these plans.
Welcome, Chris.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, board members, Mr. Manager. Very pleased this morning to bring to you the final plans and specifications for construction of the very first construction project associated with the Upper Downtown Park. So this is a milestone day for the park, isn't it, Ms. Bowe? Generally, this project scope covers clearing the way of the existing park grounds and to make way for the park. So that includes site demolition of all streets, alleys, sidewalks, parking lots, as well as utility relocation and abandonment. This graphic shows the park limits, and for orientation, the north is to the left, so the boulevard is at the left-hand side of the image, and I-40 is at the right-hand side of the image. This illustrates all the existing utilities that are within the limits of the park project. You can see it's pretty congested. This illustration shows the surface demolition within the limits of the park. Excuse me. So that includes streets, alleys, sidewalks, driveways, all the surface parking lots that are left that haven't been taken out so far. This illustrates the limits of demolition of all the existing utilities. And you can see that they're primarily within the existing street rights-of-way. So that includes storm sewer, sanitary sewer, water lines, and we're also coordinating with all the private and franchise utilities to get them relocated from out of the park as well. And this exhibit shows what the park will look like when we're finished. So all of the surface improvements will be gone. All of the utilities will be relocated around the perimeter of the park. So as we're not just demoing everything, we're also going to build some new utilities. That includes a 30-inch diameter water transmission main that we're going to route around the perimeter of the park. It includes some large diameter storm sewer, one of which is crossing the park on 7th Street there in front of Union Station. You can see several lines in front of Union Station. That's the old 7th Street alignment. That includes a 90-inch diameter storm sewer that we're going to extend across the park. So that's 7.5 feet diameter. It also includes a telephone or a telecommunications duct bank that MAPS is building. And what that will do is allow all the telecom companies, there's 5 different ones, to cross the park in that one location. And that minimizes the impact on the park design because they do need to cross the park for their infrastructure to maintain their connectivity. Schedule at this point, we'll move on to council and advertise the project next week at the end of September. We'll take bids in October and award the contract in November, and we're currently slated for a December 1 start date. We're estimating a 10-month construction duration for the project, which would have us wrap up at the end of September 2016. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Rob?
Does that include demolition of the Film Exchange building, that other building?
It does not. Those are still within the MAPS process and will remain so. So that's not included in this project.
Councilman?
Yes, will there be any overhead electrical lines or other communication lines through the park?
There will not. We, as part of the process, and as part of the park process, have had extensive meetings with all of the utility companies and are working with them to get those removed.
Thank you.
Let me just point out there may be a period during construction where the transmission lines that are on 4th Street, is it 4th, will be there because we're still working with OG&E on Convention Center location, and there's a lot of pieces moving still. But it is our intent when the park is ready to go that those transmission lines will be out of there. But like I said, during construction, they may be there for a while.
Thank you.
Other questions? Kim?
I would just like to say that we certainly saw this presentation, and I think a lot of questions were asked yesterday at the Park Subcommittee. We unanimously approved it, but I'd also like at this point in time to thank Chris and Olive Johnson for the work that your team has done to consolidating this into what is a beautifully clean plan. If you remember back to what we originally saw about what is underneath that park, I mean, it looks like a spaghetti bowl that's been thrown around and tossed around and some extra spaghetti added. So it's a lot, I know, of work to negotiate, I believe up to 12 utility companies coming all together. So great work done.
Indeed. Thank you so much.
Well, we have the resolution in your packet. Shall we approve it? Been moved and seconded that we approve the resolution approving the final plans and specifications as described in item 6. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It is unanimously adopted. David, item 7.
Item 7 is recommend resolution approving change order number 5 and amendment number 2 for the MAPS 3 Phase 1 West River Trail connection, South Council Road to Northwest 10th Street, a decrease of $22,387.75, project M3-T001A. This is the northern part of the West River Trail. This is a change order and an amendment. Remember, change orders are new items that had to be negotiated with the contractor. The amendment portion of it is where we just adjust the quantities on items that have already had prices established on them. So the first part is the change order, and there were erosion control measures that we had to add. A lot of riprap and geogrid is a permeable fabric that we use to stabilize soil. There's $56,000 in that, and that is really due to the April, May, and early June rains that were exceeding the design capacity of the trail there that is not at the contractor's fault. Then we had quantity adjustments, which is where at the end of the project, if we use less rock, more asphalt, less this and that, and we adjust all the quantities. So we had a $76,000 credit. So that's where we end up with the $22,000 credit. So I can answer any questions if you have any.
Sue? It's been moved and seconded that we approve the resolution included in your packet approving the change order number 5 and amendment number 2 as described in item 7. Further discussion?
I just had a question. Are we close to accepting these projects?
We are. I hope to bring you final acceptance on that piece next week. So this is pretty much wrapping it up. There might be a couple
We
others.
accepted the eastern portion of the trail.
No, we have not.
We have both of them yet to accept.
Right. They've been essentially finished, but there's what they call punch list items that they're still doing out there. So I hope next month we'll be bringing you a final.
Thank you.
Further questions? Motion has been made and seconded that we approve the resolution. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The resolution is adopted. That brings us to item number 8, David.
Item 8 is recommend resolution approving contract for engineering services with C.H. Guernsey and Company for MAPS 3 sidewalks Phase 4 improvements, fee of $369,203, and assigning EST Incorporated and Intercon Services Incorporated as testing laboratories. Project M3-W004. This is the next phase of the sidewalk projects that we've been working on. This went through the usual procedure for consultant selection, and we ask that you approve C.H. Guernsey to do this engineering work.
All right, are there questions for David? Recommendation, Sue, from the subcommittee?
Yes, I move approval.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the resolution in your packet that is included as item number 8 on the agenda. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The resolution is adopted. That brings us to item 9 on the agenda. Is there new business?
No, sir.
Any member have new business to be considered? That brings us to the MAPS 3 subcommittee reports. Any subcommittee, I'm going to ask David if he will give us an update on where we are on the convention center in his report, unless Sue has something that she wants to add. All right, any other subcommittee want to be heard at this time? Sue?
I'd just like to say that the Trails and Sidewalk Committee, we know there are a lot of people cycling around the city now, and there will be more and more people. So start to become aware about what the law is for you if you're in a car, and it's a 3-foot halo. And fortunately, the city is going to do a little push that's called Watch for Me OKC. So you maybe have seen it on some buses. There'll be a couple demonstration places in the city, but we know that transportation-wise, we're becoming a little more thoughtful about we don't have to always be a one person driving one car. And so hopefully we're moving around a little more, using some of these trails and sharing the road at times, or building some designated bike lanes. But help whoever you know and whatever you do to pay attention to that. So that's just a little public announcement that between now and the next time we meet, you'll notice that happening a little more.
Thank you, Sue. Any other, Michael?
Yes, we had the groundbreaking for Healthy Living Inc., which is our first wellness center about 3 weeks ago. It was just so exciting to be there. It was a long time coming, as you all know, and I certainly want to thank those of you who were able to make that, Tom and the mayor and Kim and Sue, and I looked around Nathaniel and Michael. It was just great, and it was quite a lot of folks out there, and it really kind of sparked me on and kind of got me re-energized about what we're doing. And I just want to thank everyone for being a part of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I thought that the photos of the event showed that when you turned the first shovel of dirt, you had more dirt in your shovel than anybody. Congratulations. Dee?
Tuesday, we had a walkthrough of the new river facility, and it was amazing. I can't even think of any other word to describe it. It was just unbelievable. The media was there. It's so big and so much better and more fantastic than I ever dreamed it would be when we were shown little models and pieces of paper. But every decision that the committee made and the city council approved were the right decisions. The kayak house, double story on the main building, it makes sense. It really was fantastic, and thanks to all of you on the committee that came.
I'll add.
Michael?
It was very impressive, and I think one of the things we need to be communicating to the public, and I think the word may have gotten out a little bit, that this is basically going to be a public park, and it's going to be open, free of charge, on a daily basis for folks to come in. And if they don't want to get wet, there's no cost to them. But they can come in and they can watch the activities, they can see what's going on, and then if they want to participate and do some rafting or do some kayaking or sit down and have a cup of coffee or a couple of restaurants in there, or just do some other things around there. There's a gift shop or a pro shop, I guess, things like that. They'll certainly be looking to participate in those, but there's not going to be general admission just to get into the park. And so I hope everybody does come out. I think people will come out and visit it, and then after a time or two, maybe they'll start getting their toes wet and doing some of it. But I think it'll be very exciting.
That's great. Anybody else? Any other subcommittee report? Well, then that brings us then to informational.
Mr. Channel?
Oh, I'm sorry.
If I just wanted to make this comment, I attended the state fair yesterday, and while I've seen renderings and drawings of the new expo center, it wasn't until I was out there in person that I realized how big and massive that is. And David, maybe we could somehow get some film footage and place on the city's website, just to, especially while people are out there, to help give that perspective. It is massive. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I was out there for the state fair too, and it is very impressive, and they're moving along. I think the project's moving along well. They've had some delays, but I think it's moving along now well, don't you, David?
Yes, sir.
Great. All right, that brings us to, if no more subcommittee reports, that brings us to informational item, and we have our friend, I started to say old friend, but I'll say young friend, Mary Margaret Jones is here to give us an informational item.
I do. Let me point out, this is a request for bids, Maps 3 Upper Downtown Public Park Tree Package, Project M3-P006A. This project or package will go out as a procurement item, and something we've done before, like with the whitewater equipment and some other things like that. It's still going to be bid, but it doesn't go through the usual process. So the subcommittee didn't vote on it, and this board won't necessarily vote on it now. You'll get a chance as it comes back. When we get the low bidder and we're ready to initiate a contract, it will come through the subcommittee for contract award. It'll come through this this body, and then it will ultimately go to council for award. So it's a little different procedure. So that's why we have it here on informational items, because I wanted everybody to know what we were doing and what was going on, and give you a chance to comment before it just comes back as a bid project and need to approve it. So we got Mary Margaret Jones here to talk about the tree package.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Tom.
Welcome.
Thank you, members of the board. So this is sort of a red letter day, because when I was before you last time, and then I went to City Council, and our preliminary report was approved, that enabled us to actually move forward with this process. And it is the beginning, in a way, of realizing the park. So it's quite exciting. So I'll give you these 4 things very quickly, an overview, the tree panel members, the trees, and our next steps. So this is the schedule. This is where we are. We're calling this part of Upper Park construction, but in fact it's not really construction on site. It is part of the realization of the physicality of the park, though, because we will be purchasing these trees. And as David or Mike pointed out earlier, it's not like we'll be purchasing trees all that time. We purchase them and then they're growing all that time, so we get a much better bang for our buck, so to speak. So this shows you how we've begun thinking about installation of the trees. The majority of them, 822 of the 953 trees, will be planted in the optimal season in 2017, and that's important for tree and survivability. The areas that won't quite be ready for planting yet because of construction phasing are the ones in blue, and we will be planting those in 2018. Still at an okay time, and so all will be planted in accordance to construction staging and the health of the trees. And this is why we're doing it, because the tree on the left is what we can afford, and the tree in the middle is what we want to plant in 2 years. So by buying them now and paying some amount, but not a great deal, for them to be tended and put in a pot and get used to being in our climate, then we will have trees like you see in the rectangle, and of course in 10 years we'll have trees, we hope, like you see in the large size. So this shows you the perimeter area that we will be looking to buy trees from. We will not be buying them from the coast of Texas or from Florida, where they're really cheap but completely unsuitable. So they just won't acclimatize. So we will be restricting the area within which the trees can be sourced. And this is how we've done that process. We of course came up with design intent, one prong of this triangle. Then we assembled a panel of experts, local experts, to help us with the second prong, which is suitability. And that panel of experts included people from OSU, Maureen Heffernan and her experience at Myriad, people from City Parks and Recreation Department, people from various departments and research institutions and departments that know their stuff, because we found no one person has the answer, and it really took consensus building. You know, it really took conversation and consensus building. So that addresses suitability. Now we look at the third prong of the triangle, which is availability, and that's why we go out to bid. And we may get feedback from these growers of what's available or what's not. They may suggest substitutions. So it will be a little bit of a back and forth process. So just to give you a little bit of an overview of the trees we're looking at, these are the types of trees. You see these 8 different types of trees. You see how they're arrayed on the site, and you see their numbers on the site. So the majority of them are the woodland trees, but a good number of them are shade trees in the lawn, on the oval, and on the promenade allée. And then from there, they're dispersed across the site in various ways. So just to go through them, just first to talk about existing trees, we are maintaining in place every existing tree that was suitable and could stay in place. We are transplanting some, and we are making very carefully sure that we're saving the ones around Union Station, because that's where it's really important that those stay in place. So on the site, we have some flowering trees. Each time I'll show you a slide of what our goals were and what our long list were, as you see here, and then you see the short list. So this is what will go out in the package to the growers, this short list, and we will see what they come back with. And the same thing for the littoral trees. Now, these are trees that will be around the lake that like to have their feet wet. So those are some of the criteria. So each kind of tree has criteria. Each kind of tree had a long list, and through the process of the committee, we came up with this short list for the littoral trees. And we're thinking about things like pollen, we're thinking about things like hardiness, we're thinking about things like shade, and all the soil conditions we have, drainage, etc. So Hudson Streetscape, long debate about what to do, but we are going to extend, the idea was to extend the 180 trees, the lacebark elm allée. And then the woodland trees, looking for a real range of trees here. Obviously we want shade, but we also want some evergreen, we also want some flowering trees. So you see the short list for the predominant trees that will be creating shade, and then the understory trees that will be creating color and accent and scale, and then the evergreen trees that will be giving us color, green color, even in the winter. So it's a really nice mix, and you can see there are some that are sort of unusual, and so we're only calling for a few of those because they might be harder to find. And then the ones we're looking for in great numbers, we're looking for, tried and true go-to trees, if you will. The Robinson Streetscape, also the lacebark elm as the street tree. And then the promenade tree. The promenade tree was being debated even as late as day before yesterday. And the conclusion was to use the Shumard oak. But it will be very important with this oak in particular. Some of you may know your trees and may know that the Shumard oaks in front of Devon are having a hard time. And we learned that's because of where they came from. So we have to be very careful of the source of these Shumard oaks. So we will be. And then the Boulevard Streetscape. And here we're looking for, a very big tree. We want instant impact along the boulevard. And we are proposing the London plane tree. The shade trees in the lawn, more of a range with more of a dappled shade, but enough shade to keep you cooler when you're under them. And this is our short list. So you can see it. Some of them are sort of specimen-like, and some of them are more sort of background, and we're looking for the mix of both. So our next steps, we will open the bid or begin the bid process very shortly in October. We will close the bid process in November, and we will award the bid before the end of December. So that's where we stand. Any questions?
David? No, I'm sure.
Will these trees be housed, like if we get a grower from Arkansas, say, will the trees be housed there until they're bigger, or will they come to Oklahoma City?
They come here. So they get moved just to some location where they can begin to acclimatize within a certain perimeter, diameter of radius or radius of distance from us.
Since the redbud is the state tree, it's just a request on my part, can we, because I see it's listed as one of the types of trees that will be purchased, but can we set one aside in, say, a more prominent area and maybe, just make sure it's a good size tree when we obtain it, just so it can have a feature place in the park. And then secondly, the other request I would make is if we could have an evergreen placed, again, in a prominent place that we could use for future Christmas tree lightings each year.
We will have interpretive, this is a good question, and we haven't gotten to that level of detail yet, but we will be doing interpretive signage. And I think that it'll be important to have the interpretive signage address things like the state tree and the fact that there are the numbers of trees there are and the types and why. So I think all of that will be very important. In terms of the Christmas tree, we typically find in most cities that bringing in a Christmas tree is preferred and putting it in a paved area so that people can gather around it more easily. But that's an interesting question, and we will certainly look at that.
Thank you.
Other questions?
On the redbud, I will note that we've been alerted by, for instance, Carrie, who takes care of the trees at the memorial, that redbuds only live about, their life expectancy is only about 15 years, and they're now replacing theirs. And there will be an educational process too to make sure people understand that that's not a problem, that that's normal, and that's just their life cycle. So I think there's a whole educational process about the trees that can be part of the interpretive signage of this park. Right?
Sue?
Another comment. Wonderful. There's so much work that goes into this. I'm thinking about this. I'm thinking about the streetcars. and how much we're learning as a city on the process of things. But sure seems like this piece, as you go forward, it'd be wonderful to show pictures of this on the website about the trees growing. And the same thing if we could get pictures of the streetcars being built. But I was wondering about the possibility of having a survivor tree also. And I know there's seedlings that are out there. That would be nice to have one of those growing with our trees.
Right. I think the idea of the photographs of the process is a great idea on the website. It helps people anticipate the park, know what's happening, and learn at the same time. And you certainly are a city taking on so many projects that you're really putting yourselves on the map, nationally and internationally. The survivor tree issue was discussed early on. The mayor was even part of those discussions, and the memorial was part of those discussions, and the decision was not to do that, not to take away from, in a way, the sort of special quality of what's happening at the memorial itself. All right. Thank
Other
you.
questions?
Okay.
As always.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mary Margaret. We appreciate you being here. That brings us then to item 12, an update status. David, what do you need to tell us today?
Well, I can tell you that we're very busy and we've got a lot of things going on. As was mentioned, tour was given on Tuesday of the Whitewater facility. We had about 40 people there, including media, and very happy with what's going on out there. Senior Wellness, Mr. Dover mentioned the groundbreaking that we had. So Wellness Center 1, construction is underway, and Wellness Center 2, the design continues on that, and in the near coming months we will have final plans and begin that second one. Trails and Sidewalks is very active. The Phase 1 trails, which is the West River Trail, as we talked about a little bit during the change order, projects 1 and 2 are complete. They're doing the punch list items, and we'll be finaling those real soon. Phase 2 of the trails, the I-44 corridor, has one piece still in design, and the other two pieces are acquiring right away. And the Phase 3 trails is in consultant selection. Phase 3 is the Draper Trail. Phase 1, projects 1, 2, and 3 sidewalks are complete. Phase 2, projects 1 and 2 sidewalks are in construction. Phase 3, project 1 sidewalk is in construction. Phase 3, project 2 is in design, and Phase 4 sidewalks is going with the consultant negotiations as you approve the resolution today. Convention Center, the site acquisition continues. The Alliance for Economic Development is handling that. I know that appraisals have been done. Owners have been contacted. There's 2 sites with 3 configurations that we're looking at. A whole lot of things still going on until we land on something. I hope in the very near future we start to hone in and come up with a solution on that. Fairgrounds, as Mr. Greenwell mentioned, the Expo building is under construction. It is a very expansive building. It is quite a scene to go out there and see how large that is, but it is well under construction. And you saw some information on the park today. The design of the upper park continues, and the utility plans will soon be out for bid, so you'll start seeing dirt actually moved out there and utilities being relocated very soon. And then the streetcar, the preliminary design is complete. The mainline construction plans are in design, and then we talked about the streetcar today, so lots going on.
Questions for David? Questions for David? All right, thank you. That brings us to item 13. Any comments by the board? Michael?
I just had a question, David. The charts that Mike passed out earlier today on the timelines, are we going to distribute those to each of the subcommittees so they can review each of their individual projects as well?
We can, yes, sir.
I think it would be good.
Okay.
And also, I just wanted to comment, I've been out on the West Trail a couple of times in the last month or so, and it looks great and getting a lot of activity, so.
That's great.
I think folks are accepting it very well.
Bob?
Well, just a footnote to what Sue and Mike have said. When I was out at the River Sport Rapids tour Tuesday, I was just chatting with Kelly Ogle, who's an avid cyclist, and he was just raving about the River Trail, and says it's a phenomenal facility and becoming a very, very popular route for evening and weekend cyclists. So I haven't been out there myself. I'm not much of a bike rider, but I understand it is just a phenomenal I wanted to pass those comments along.
It's interesting that he would say that because the first week that we had the opening, he trashed it, or not trashed it, but he complained that it wasn't complete and we were opening it already. So it's kind of funny that he's turned around so much.
Kim?
Two things. First, I would have liked to have reported earlier that we have a new member of our Parks Subcommittee, Maureen Heffernan, who is the Executive Director at Myriad Gardens, has been appointed to replace one of our members, Debbie Bokar, who's moved to New York to be closer to her family and her new granddaughter. So we welcome her with open arms and the expertise that she brings. And then secondly, I wanted to comment a little bit about ADG's presentation on the timeline. When we first came together as an advisory board, and I think the first time we saw our first timeline, I can't imagine that there wasn't any of us that sit on this horseshoe that weren't overwhelmed by the amount of projects, the depth of the projects, our lack of knowledge as general citizens to how these projects go. And I could only recant it to trying to build a custom home or do a home renovation, and you know that it never runs on schedule, and budgets are always out the door, and there's so many hurdles. And I just want to say how proud I am of ADG and the MAP staff for keeping $777 million worth of projects really operating at what I think is a very efficient pace, a very well thought out pace, and overcoming hurdles that I think many cities would have just thrown up their hands and say, okay, we're moving on to something else. So great job, well done every day, and certainly your report card reflects that. I give you an A+.
Thank you, Kim. Well said. Anyone else? Well, I do think that Mike Adams has a good idea. I think that particularly the subcommittee chairs and co-chairs ought to take heart in the information we've been given and make sure that we're communicating with David and the staff and that we understand what we need to be doing to move these along. I don't think it is not unusual when you decide to do something that's going to take 10 years and that there will be some hurdles. And we've had a good number of them, and I also commend David and his staff and Mike and Nicole and everyone from ADG about keeping us on track and keeping us going in the right direction. And I'm really excited about how far we've gone. I do want to say all these things about this will look good in 10 years has me a little nervous, but as the oldest member of the board. But so move it along as you can. Move it along. Otherwise, any other comments from the board? All right, staff, anyone from staff? I want to say thank you to Jill for sitting in for Carol today. We generally try to provide a new lawyer with some complicated questions on their first time here, but today we were just moving along. But thanks for coming, Jill. Appreciate it. Citizens. All right, that moves us to the last item, adjournment. Someone want to move we adjourn? Been moved and seconded that we adjourn. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. We're adjourned. Thank you for coming.